All right. Here we are back again for another podcast episode. And I have one of my favorite guests joining me once again. We have Christina Caudill with us. Thanks for joining me, Christina.
Hi, Melissa. Hello, all of you energetic principals, friends, and fabulous fans.
Yeah,
Great to be here with you.
yes, I have. When's the last time we spoke? I feel like it was earlier in 2021,
I don't
around the
even
time that
remember.
I know. I was talking to Gray about this, how like this year has flown. It's flew the coop. I don't know where it went. It's all a blur. You would think we'd remember it with so much going on, but I guess they say when there is so much thrown at you, it's hard to like keep up with it all, I suppose.
So much Jupiter. And you were just saying we have a full moon trine Jupiter coming up too. I'm like, I think I've had like a little too much of the good thing of Jupiter lately.
Yeah, Jupiter's giving it to us right now. Yeah, we're recording a couple days before the Jupiter full moon. It might be called that. I mean, it's the Gemini full moon, but it's trine Jupiter, so there's plenty of Jupiter to go around. But this of course will air afterwards, but we are under the influence of the busy Gemini moon. I feel like I'm juggling so much. Christina, what about you? You feel the busyness of the
Of
mercurial?
course, because I am also a Mars and Gemini, as you are.
Yes.
So every time I try to tell myself I'm just going to focus on the one thing and give it my all, and then this pops up, and this pops up, and this pops up. So I find myself doing a juggling act.
I feel like that's the story of us Mars and Gemini life. Like the intention is good to focus on one thing, but the reality is that, they're just everything just comes at you. And we were born able to juggle. That's why we get it, is because we have the ability to do it. Do we want to do it? Not always, but we're able to. So
Yeah, I totally agree. That's the story of my life. So I'm super excited to be looking at Mars moving into Sagittarius and what we can expect with that. And I'm also, as you may be, as I am, looking forward to the North Node moving out of Gemini soon too, because I think Gemini needs a little bit of a rest.
I do. I am looking forward to that, but I have to say, knowing that they're moving to my angles, with
Oh,
Taurus and Scorpio, it's
you're up. You're up next.
I'm up. I am up next. Basically, all us fixed signs. Well, we've already been up too, because like Saturn Uranus square, which the last one perfects under this Capricorn season, which is what Christine and I are here to talk about. Um, but yeah, it's like the next stage of the fixed extravaganza.
Mhm.
Yeah, so my heart goes out to all you Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, and Leo risings, or people with angles in those places, because we are, as Christina just said, up next. Yeah. So before we get started here on our broadcast of the Capricorn Solstice season, we're reaching the end of 2021 here. For those listeners who are not aware of Christina and should be, Christina, will you give a little background on yourself?
Of course. Thank you so much. I'm Christina Caudill with Radiant Astrology. I'm an evolutionary astrologer. You can find me online at radiantastrology.com. I do courses and programs. Last year, I did a bunch of astrology summits. That's what a lot of people might know me for, where I gathered together all of the most exciting women in astrology. And those recordings are still available on radiantastrology.com. I'm not sure what I have planned for this next year, because I'm trying to take my time, because this January is packed, which is what we're going to be talking about. And I'm almost like, whenever we have a Mercury retrograde at the beginning of the year, I almost feel like, it's better to just kind of bide my time, before I make any like really big plans. But as I said, you can find me on radiantastrology.com. I have a podcast, the Radiant Astrology podcast on iTunes, which also is kind of on hiatus and going through a little bit of hopefully I'll have more of some insight on how I want to manifest that for 2022, make it more fresh. But yeah, I work mostly with clients on life purpose. And I love looking at the astrology of midlife, of how we can, really work with those outer planets to find a greater expression of ourselves and our life purpose and living a more meaningful and fulfilling life. And I think that's actually one of the beautiful things that you can get from astrology, is really a deeper understanding of yourself, what you're capable of, and what you really want to do, what your soul is calling for. So that's really what radiant astrology is all about.
I love that because, midlife, being a midlifer myself, and I know Christina, you're there too. It is such a potent time of life to really get in touch with what is this all about? Because we just get hit with slews of outer planet transits, and they wonder why people have, the quote unquote midlife crisis. And that's because a lot is coming at you, but in a good way, because it really wants to get you in touch with why you are here if you're on that mission. And how do you, kind of a lot of times change course to get aligned with what that is. So very valuable service for sure. So all right. Well, Capricorn season, I picked the perfect person to join me for this because we do have a Capricorn sun and
I
a
was not
Capricorn
going to
rising.
have another guest. I was not going to let you bring me. I said, Capricorn season for me. I'm coming on.
That's right. I know if I hadn't invited her, I'm sure she would have been like, Mel, do you have any?
I
And
have a
that's,
Scorpio moon that you don't want to mess with.
we got to hear it from the Capricorn's mouth, because that is how, you get to understand the energy better by someone who lives it. So basically during this broadcast, you have someone with a Capricorn sun, a Capricorn rising, and then myself with a Capricorn moon. So we are
I
covering
love that.
the
And I have
Capricorn.
Capricorn, I have Mercury in Capricorn too.
Yes. Very
So
valuable.
we got
And
just about everything covered.
we have it covered. And so that is pretty exciting. And yeah, so I mean, one of the things that starts off Capricorn season is the fact that it is the solstice, and that one of the four major turning points of the year, where, of course, depending on where you live in the world, it is the northern area. In the northern hemisphere, it is the winter solstice as the light begins to come back, versus the southern hemisphere where they have the summer solstice, where the light has reached its maximum, potential. I don't know, potential is the word, but it hits its maximum cycle and then begins to recede. So, Christina, what do you think is the most important, energies that we extract from solstice season?
Mm-hmm. I mean, we tend to see the solstice as like a time of darkness. And I think what is really insightful about understanding these cycles is that we are starting to open up to bring in, as you said, more light. But we can feel really inward focused. I mean, remember, Capricorn is actually a yin sign. I mean, even though we associate it a lot with things like, the 10th house, which tends to be a public house, with like the archetype of the authority figure, the father, the public image, all these things that have to do with structure and boundaries. But really, ultimately, if we can connect to its yin quality, I feel like that this is a time where we can really connect with our inner self to sort of shore ourselves up. Because if you think about, in the northern hemisphere, we're in deep winter, and the winter time is like, regardless of what the temperature really is outside, there is something that sort of constricts. And in ancient times, people would have to just really be stoic to get through the winter, and all that you've done through the year, all that you've harvested, now you're sort of kind of living off that, for the duration of the winter. And we have this sense of, now doesn't seem like the time to be like, doing big things like launching something new, or like trying to get a lot of attention or whatever. And even if with some of us, we maybe are going through the motions, because if life dictates, modern life may dictate just kind of like not paying attention to the seasons. As human beings, we do internally have that sense of, this is a time of constriction. This is a time of assessing, where we're at. I love to really more look back during this time, like look at this
Mm,
past year. What were the lessons of this past year? What do we have to learn before we can fully, launch into the new year and have our New Year's resolutions and have our, goals and start attacking a new year. We really want to take this time to really assess. And sometimes that assessing means, what do we release? What do we eliminate? And then what are we going to recommit to? Because if
mm,
anything, Saturn being ruled by, I'm sorry, Capricorn being ruled by Saturn, really, really benefits from a commitment, and a commitment when it's something that we can fully put ourselves around. Like you were talking before we got on, that you and your partner had some of these big goals, but like, doing all the little things, how are we going to actually get there? But it's so important to even have that big vision and know
yeah.
what are you committed to, because then everything else can just support that big vision. Sometimes, I'll say I'm often the opposite. I'm like doing like my to-do list, and then it's like, wait, where am I? Where am I going? I'm just like treading water. But when you know that you're committed to a vision, a path, something that's worth maybe taking on extra burdens, extra responsibilities, those type of not sexy not sexy things that are Capricorn, maybe not so fun in the moment, but ultimately they're leading to some kind of path of satisfaction. And I think this is a time when, again, like I love Sagittarius season for like, holiday season party,
Mhm.
whatever. But then we kind of, if we're really sort of being attuned to the time, then it's time to really, reassess, being either alone or just with those few people that really we feel like are family, know us, that we really want to share our our holidays with, or our this very quiet time with, and make certain decisions that can help us through this threshold for a new year. Once we cross over the threshold, we do feel like, we're leaving something behind, and hopefully going into a new future where we have a lighter load. If we can take off the burdens that are no longer worth carrying forward, so that we can be stronger to build a new future for the new year. That's how I like to sort of see this sort of transition.
I love that because I mean, one of the things when we talk about Capricorn and Cancer both together is that they are definitely signs that can be, I don't want to say centered in the past, but take the past into consideration, because there's a traditionalist energy that comes with it. Cancer Capricorn likes traditions and the holidays and things that are, time tested and true to some extent. And I think that if we don't slow down, if we rush through Sagittarius season and get right to the goal, and we haven't checked in with, what has even worked for us? What have we done? How has that panned out? Is that working? Because it's cardinal energy. We are moving to a time that is action oriented, forward moving. But if you just kind of like you were saying, if you're just always moving forward and maybe you just have all these little goals and you're caught in the treading water of just movement, it's like what is the purpose of that movement? And so checking in at this kind of critical time to allow us to know where we're going before we start the new year. And I know the new year can be kind of arbitrary in the sense that we created this calendar structure. Not everybody abides by January 1st being the beginning of the year, but in our culture, for the most part, we are all kind of quote unquote starting fresh at January 1st. But we get a good, like, solid, 9 days of Capricorn season before that turnover of the first. And so there's something to be said within those first degrees. If we were to just do as Christina suggested, take a minute, see where we've been, acknowledge what we've learned from that, and then get the goal, in a proper place with a working plan to where then we can set off in motion.
And what I like about the idea of Capricorn being about a structure, if you think about like a skeleton, because it's associated with like sort of skeletons of
Mm,
bones, things like that. And I like to think about it like, okay, so I might not have like my next year or the next 6 months or whatever fully fleshed out. But if I have touch points, if I have what I like to think of as touchstones through the year, things that I want to accomplish that will move me forward in my life, not just little things that will like improve my life, but like they say, when you set goals, say even for your week ahead, are you putting in goals? Like they say, at least 3 goals to move your life forward. There's the again, that's going from just sort of tying up loose ends, or responding to what is the immediate need, but how can you move your life forward? So when I like to sort of think of, I never have a complete, detailed plan, just because I always feel like I want to be able to have enough space,
Little wiggle room.
change. Yeah, in case I forgot, like on some, like, I don't know, Saturn transit or something like that. And so to be able to just have sort of a basic structure, a basic bones of the year ahead that look like goals that I want to reach. And that takes some real reflection. And I think that this time, and even things like, I think what anything in the material realm, the earth signs tend to value, which is, how are we doing? How did I do with my finances this year? What are my wins, my losses, my regrets? And then how can I have new goals next year around those? Or, where am I with, they say Capricorn is often associated with things like achievement, right? And have I achieved what I've wanted to at this stage of my life?
Yeah.
Now, I will say with Capricorn, they say that we are late bloomers. So
that's true. That is true.
Which I actually do think is true. I'm in my 40s, and I do feel like I'm kind of hitting a certain stride, just in life in general.
But we're fine wine.
Yes,
fine
exactly.
wine.
And it's the type of maturing and aging that can actually lead to a certain elegance or a certain fullness. And so these are, I like to just really look at the entire archetype of Capricorn and say, this is Capricorn's time. And it really does take, having some boundaries around, your focus. And again, anytime we have something like, we just had Sagittarius season, and then the Capricorn's calling, okay, I need to clean up from that.
Yeah.
Sort of like the cleanup. And I mean, there's nothing worse than when January comes around and then you have to take down the Christmas tree and take down all the lights and things. And it's kind of depressing because it's like, the party's over. But what can you replace that with? We replace that with just sort of a new hope that we have a new mission for the year ahead. And I think that's a great gift to give to ourselves, is say, what's the new mission for this next 12 months? And Capricorn loves to do the work, because nothing is just going to happen with Capricorn. You can have this great vision, you can always, great optimism, but, time to sort of do the work and have a plan to do the work. And, that's just coming from my Capricorn side, I would think.
Yeah. Well, and it makes a lot of sense too. Of course, I love how you bring up how we take the decorations down, the holidays are over, the festivities, Saturn comes in. We also like, oh my God, we ate so much. Now I gotta, lay off the chocolates, or like, but at the same time, it's like the beauty of the Sagittarius Capricorn transit, other than the indulgence of festivities, is that Sagittarius is about the quest. It is about the vision. It's that transitional, mutable energy that gets us in touch with the larger opportunities that life has waiting for us. But Capricorn then says, okay, well, you've had that vision. You did that Jupiter. Well, what about Saturn? And this is how we make that vision real, is that you have to take actionable steps. You have to do things in the real world, because you can't just dream about it, can't just think about it. Like, you have to make that plan and then chip away at it with a consistent effort. And that is essentially what Saturn asks of us. So but it's exciting too. And then especially if you're people like, me or Christina, where we get, we got that Capricorn energy. We get excited about the plan. We're ready to do this. And we're like, oh no, it's going to be hard, but you know what? It's going to be fulfilling, because I'm manifesting something that is important to me, and gives me a sense of purpose. So I love that.
Said beautifully from the Capricorn moon.
All right. Well, before we're going to launch into some charts and kind of give a little overview of the main things happening and kind of break it down as well as we can in a shorter period of time. I'm going to put this recording on pause because I had a Christmas present arrive at my door, and it is it's an expensive one, so I'm not going to leave it out there. So we'll be right back with you in 2 seconds. All right, so I'm back from my mail stop here, and I do have to say, you have a good friend when a Christmas card shows up at the same time. Christina's card just literally just went through my mailbox.
All the way from Virginia, all the way to California. Perfect timing.
Look at that. I know. I I didn't even tell her until I clicked record because I thought it'd be funny. All right. That being said, mail has now arrived. And so let me pull up the chart for our actual solstice here, and we can start a little overview. Here we go. Yes. So I am going to be adding, I don't know, I've been doing a little YouTube lately. So if you're someone who likes to watch the chart, you can come on over there and see us kind of click through things. Do you see the chart okay, Christina?
Yes. Wow. Look at all that beautiful Capricorn.
All that beautiful Capricorn.
And the moon in Cancer too. And I love how you had mentioned, because this should be true for all of the axes on the zodiac, but I really especially feel that I guess because I have so much Capricorn, that I just cannot you think of Capricorn without Cancer, like, because they are on this spectrum and they really need each other. To me, I often think of, like a big oak tree, like Capricorn. It needs like the water and then, nourishing the roots and everything of Cancer, because there can so easily. At one time when I was having, when we had all that Capricorn, I mean, Saturn and Capricorn and all this stuff over all of my Capricorn, and then the South Node too and everything, I really felt like, gosh, I really need to consciously connect with my feminine side, with my self-care and everything, because I could have easily gone to so much of the Capricorn shadow dark side, just being too rigid.
Yeah, you need that lunar side. That's the thing, is with Cancer and Capricorn, and also Leo and Aquarius having the luminaries on one side and then Saturn ruled on the other. It's the most extreme of pairings. When we think of the moon, we think of it being so soft and, kind of delicate and cycle oriented and, dare we say, a little moody, at the whims of feeling, versus Saturn, it's the farthest out there. It can be a little cut off. It could be a little cold. It's Capricorns. We get the bad rap of being cold, and that's not necessarily the truth at all. It's just we probably end up encountering a lot of people that are a little more moon based. They're like, but what, we can kind of put up that Saturn has its purpose. It's not meant to be cold in that sense, but depending on another person's makeup or even our own, when we encounter it, it could feel that way, but it's not the intention. I swear, we get a bad rap. But yeah, so we start off the solstice basically with the sun, Mercury, of course, Pluto's been in Capricorn forever, but also Venus, who has just stationed retrograde literally like 2 days before the solstice began. So all of Capricorn season has Venus retrograde, which is a big part of the season itself. But that is not the only thing going on. We also have Jupiter about to move into Pisces during this season. We have the final Saturn-Uranus exact square, which you'll see in this chart. Is yeah, or no, I think it's on the 23rd.
I thought it was 24th.
Well, they move so slow. It's basically the end of, December. So that's a big element happening. And then once we get into January, we have the nodal axis moving from Gemini and Sagittarius to Taurus and Scorpio. And then we also have Mercury going retrograde somewhat near Saturn. So Christina, can we fit anything more into Cap season?
January is going to be a show. A bleep. No, just kidding. We'll get to it, but I have my eye on that Let me see. Is it a full moon conjunct Pluto or a new moon? It must be a new moon.
It'll be a full moon. It's not exactly conjunct, but it's close enough. It's a I'm just gonna skip ahead so we
Let me
can
just
see
see
it
that real quick.
on so January 17th
Okay,
here.
the sun is conjunct Pluto. Yeah, so
Oh
sorry.
no,
The full
that's
moon
it's pretty
opposite
much, yeah,
Pluto.
it is
Yeah.
pretty much, it's close. So everybody put your Pluto boots on. Get your get ready for some, who's ready for
Walking
some
through the
Pluto?
muck.
Yeah, that's
We'll
right.
get to that, but I feel like that's the highlight of this coming, month. Really, that's one of the big highlights. But we have some territory to cover before we get
We
there. But
do.
that's definitely where we're headed.
We do. Yeah. And it's always interesting to think too with the way that the lunations are set up right now is that we have all these late degree full moons taking place where when we get to the end of the sign and the energy is being lit up towards the end of something, there can be a lot of extra like culminating points or just something about that house or that energy that has been around for a long time that we're finally dealing with or ending or celebrating or like there's it's got a little bit more intensity. I mean, obviously add Pluto to it, but I think just those late degrees, which, as far as terms are concerned or the bounds, usually they're ruled by a malefic. And so there can be just a lot of pressure that comes with those late degree planets or just the fact that we're having a full
Interesting. I
lunation.
hadn't realized that the late degree bounds were ruled by malefics, but I'm seeing, yeah, Saturn,
Yeah, we see.
Mars, Saturn,
Mhm,
Mars.
exactly.
That's
So it's something to think about. Where we get to the end of the degree and we think about Saturn, where we might have to, have some sort of final decision or deal with something that has now built up that has become an obstacle and we have to pursue over it. Or maybe Mars is like, okay, well, you have to have that final push. Like, are you going to put your all into whatever this was that has been accumulating or has been on the back burner that you haven't dealt with, that's why it gets so
wow.
kind of pregnant in energy in a sense. But as Christina said, let's not get ahead of ourselves too much. Let's pull it back to our sun ingress
We
here.
just gave a spoiler.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. But at the same time, it's kind of good to see what we almost end the season with, because at least we have that context as we go through, what
And
that's going to look
interesting
like.
because, like, as you know, we've talked about many times before, is that there's these hot degrees, right? There's some degrees that just once they get triggered by things, then you have these sort of echoes. And so I'm noticing that Venus retrograde or Venus stationing retrograde, which, as we know, is conjunct Pluto. Obviously, when that full moon comes along, the sun is, as we know, is conjunct Pluto, but it is, also that degree echoing the Venus station degree,
Yeah.
which, 27 degrees is the United States Pluto, correct? Is that
Yes, and we are we are leading towards that
27
in
Capricorn?
February. Yes, the
Mhm.
Pluto return. And it's interesting to look at this ingress chart too, and just see that the moon in Cancer is basically near where its full moon is going to be. It's off by like maybe like 1 degree or so, but it's kind of like you just said, like the Venus Pluto conjunction and the moon lighting that up just around the solstice is echoing kind of the full moon that's to come a handful of weeks later. So yeah, it's patterns, cycles, I tell you.
Yes. Well, let me ask you, how do you normally, or do you normally, being Capricorn moon, I would think that you would, do you normally have any kind of ritual, or how do you acknowledge the Capricorn solstice? For me, I'm usually the past several years, I've usually been working in some way, but I also feel like it's a real time to, even if I do have, say, work to do, the period, even just a few days around it, I feel like there's like this kind of silence, like silent night. To
Mm,
me, it's almost as sacred as Christmas itself. Um, because we know that we do feel this, I always feel the shift into Capricorn season. It's the final season of our calendar year. There is something that feels like a wrapping up. There is something that feels like a reality check, even in some ways.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I almost wonder if it's because we're only a few days out from Christmas, which, a lot of people celebrate, whether you consider yourself religious or not. It is originally that pagan
Everything is
holiday.
closed, so there's
Everything,
not
yeah.
anything to
Well,
do.
and there's the lead up of, the festivities that we have with family and getting all our fairs in order and gifts and all that type of stuff. So it's really busy in a sense, but it also slows down just personally, because a lot of people do have time off from work, or they're getting ready for time off, or they're working, but they're half working, like they've got senioritis, like where it's like you feel the end of something, you're gonna, so there is that break in the holidays, even when we do have to work and show up. But I love the idea of what you said of it being that kind of silent night and that stillness that comes in, because it's like a pregnant pause that happens between the solstice and the new year, where even if we have things to do, there's just kind of sort of this in-between transitionary energy. And when it comes to answer your question of like, what would I do, or what do I do? I don't know if I have a particular ritual that I do. I really like lighting like a candle and doing some sort of kind of candle magic ritual where I dress it in some way and, put a prayer into it, and I'll do a little kind of ceremonial lighting, and that might be it. Um, but I do feel that sense of what you're saying of just like a personal stillness and honoring that and getting excited about it too, because I don't know, it's this time of year excites me because it's like, okay, getting ready. I mean, obviously I'm going to get gifts in a couple of days. So let me be real about that. I'm like the child in me. I'm like, give me things. I still, still all about that. But I just love this, I don't know. I love the promise and everything that we just talked about the idea of like a new mission starting and it connecting with this time. So it was a
I've
roundabout way of
already
answering, but
Yeah, I mean, I've already been seeing people online saying, okay, people, now is the time where you stop working, like especially in sort of these online sort of like entrepreneurial spaces. Of course, as like a Capricorn, I'm in all of them. And they're like, okay, entrepreneurs, now you take some time off and don't work, because a lot of times when we're working for ourselves, then there's always a lot to do, right?
yeah.
And it's like, when are you going to actually take some time to rest, if not now? Like, this is the time when you have permission, to rest and to get back to some self-care, because again, we can overemphasize the Capricorn, the need to be the responsible one, the need to be the one to take care of everybody, but you can't give from an empty cup, right? You need to fill your own cup and take time to appreciate family, to appreciate what you have, to take care of your physical body. Otherwise there's that Capricorn aging, right, that could creep up on you. We have to take care of ourselves during these times too, I think.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it is a hibernation period. And I think that's something that you pointed out from the get-go. But it is a time when we're supposed to slow down, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, because obviously, for our Aussie listeners, we're like, well, it's in summer is starting. It's a different type of energy. But yeah. And yeah, where the world doesn't want us to hibernate. And I have a feeling it's going to be a little it could be a little crunchy, just because we want these things, uh, and we want to take some time off, but there is just pressure in the air with having that Saturn Uranus square about to perfect in the skies just 2 days later on the 23rd. And then we also have on Christmas Day, we have Venus, who's now retrograde, making its second conjunction to Pluto. So there is intense energy in the air, just in general. And I know, we just got a mask mandate here in California. We have the Omicron. Am I saying that right? Is that how we say this new variant?
Omicron? Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know. Omicron?
I wonder how they come up with the names of these things.
It's a Greek. It's what is it? Something having to do with the Greek or whatever. And that actually that there were several of them that did crop up. That's why it looks like it skipped letters, but that they didn't make, I guess, international news or something. So
Oh.
yeah, I heard that on some
Oh, I
podcast.
didn't know that. I guess. Oh, okay. Delta. And oh, yeah. All
Right?
right.
Yeah, from Delta to
Okay.
Pluto. That's a lot. That was a
That's a
lot.
lot of different what happened to all these other variants. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a reality with our holiday
Oh
festivities
boy, oh boy,
and
oh boy. Okay, so all
yeah.
right. So I know you said you had a whole podcast on this Venus retrograde and things like that, but like, gosh, it's being right in here in the solstice. Of course, we want to touch on it in terms of the solstice.
Yes.
We'll just Venus, what she represents, as we know, the first thing we see is our relationships, and I've noticed even with friends and people not astrologers really going through some like digging deep. Is this person really my friend? Does this person really care about me? Does this person really respect me? And these kind of really these deep questions, because I mean Venus alone would probably have us asking these if it was going retrograde, but with Pluto it
Mm.
just really intensifies it. And so there can be these real, we think of power struggles with Venus, Pluto. Also, things around the idea of our mortality, death. I mean, everything I've been seeing these past couple of days is the writer and activist Bell Hooks has just passed, and that
Hmm.
seems to have really brought up a lot of, just this intense grief with a lot of people, at least that I've noticed. And so there is this. It could even be this visceral feeling of like this, our intense feelings of attachment, of love versus hate versus like Venus wants everything to be nice and wants to attract and bring together, but with Pluto, we want to get real. Who can we really trust? Oftentimes it's questions of trust. Am I safe with this person? Even these types of
Yeah.
issues come up.
Security. It's a
Mhm.
big thing for Capricorn and Cancer both, is these security issues. And I find it interesting when we talk about who can we trust, because I just started watching, I found myself watching How Perfect, as Venus is about to station on Pluto, that HBO Max docu-series on what happened to Brittany, Brittany Murphy. I don't know if you've seen that, Christina, that where
No, I haven't seen it yet.
the actress who passed back in I think 2009, and she met this questionable man just a few days before she died. No, they got married about 3 years before she died, but and then he ended up dying the same way. I'm not gonna. It's
Remember how
watch the
bizarre that all
thing.
sounded.
It's super bizarre. There's a lot of control factors. It's honor. It's like really looking into the people that you put your trust into in relationship. And so I find it very interesting that I just happened to be watching that story, and it really creeped me out. Like I'm only about 70% through, and I'm like, I watched it late at night. I went to go to bed. I felt like the Pluto vibes. I'm like lurking around the corner, like, their ghosts are waiting for me or something. But yeah, so watch that documentary if you want to see some Venus Pluto vibes for
Mm,
sure.
and it also makes me think of sometimes we, especially people with, I mean, I have Venus in Scorpio, and there's, yeah, I know people with Venus and, aspecting Pluto and things like that, that feel like that, like, why do I attract certain maybe toxic relationships or manipulative or controlling people? And sometimes maybe there is this unconscious drive that like maybe we seek people who are a little dangerous, or or people, whether we value that, whether we're attracted to that, maybe that's something we know from childhood or something that makes us feel familiar even if it's not safe. And the good thing about Pluto is it can help us to really look at our psychology, look at our shadow, the things that we don't know. Of course, we normally think that we're making conscious decisions all the time, but actually they say like 80% of our decision making and our even our movements are usually unconscious, so we're operating on this sort of unconscious script. And this is a great time to be looking at who am I attracted to? If I have these patterns of toxic relationships, whether it's, love relationships, sexual relationships, or even, friends, things like that, people we let into our world, are we attracting people who either, they try to manipulate us, or maybe we want people to overpower or things like that. These power dynamics are really in play right now. And so with the sun coming into Capricorn, along with Mercury, it feels like that we have more of an opportunity to bring it into consciousness, right? Rather than
Yeah.
these things to just be operating unconsciously. And of course, Capricorn, with Capricorn, it's time to take responsibility, for how we do move. I mean, it's not it's not our fault if we were somehow emotionally abused or physically abused or any kind of, because oftentimes we see these themes of abuse with Pluto. But can we kind of create the boundaries that are needed, sort of also create the internal strength to break these patterns or to change these patterns? I say that that's one, potential of this time, where we can use it to really look at ourselves and our life and potentially make some changes.
I love that, Christina, because we're looking at a solstice chart, so we have this energy under us for basically 3-month period, with the moon opposing all that, and Venus about to embark in a very potent retrograde period, where, as you said, it has the sun and Mercury that is going to be involved in this, and especially Mercury at the end of the month, which we'll get into, as Mercury goes over Venus and Pluto simultaneously. But that is when we become aware of these things. That's when the perception of Mercury brings it to our attention, whether it is we're thinking about it, we're seeing it in a different light, we're having conversations around it. And the sun helps us, it gives us that shot of spotlight of awareness that can be almost that aha moment, where we're like, oh, I see this within me, or I see how this has to change, or I see where I need to take responsibility. I love the idea of taking responsibility, because we have to take responsibility for ourselves and our relationships. Like, if we want relationships to work, and these are all relationships, so the romantic, business, the person you meet on the street, your parents, what have you, you have to take responsibility for your actions and how you manifest yourself into the situation. So we can have a lot of aha moments that come around some potentially triggering things, but they're ultimately in our best interest, because that is the beauty of going through Pluto, is that healing process. So that purification energy that helps us finally tackle something that could be deep rooted and not pleasant to look at. But once we shine the light on it, or start to kind of peel the crud away from it, we're like, oh, but there is hope around here, or maybe it's not so bad. Sometimes we build things up and add layers to them, layers that once we address it, we, kind of have that freedom that can come after taking responsibility for trying to be a better person, and not trying, but actually mastering ourself. Because I think Capricorn also has a foot deep in self-mastery as well. So I thought it's exciting.
Love it. And, it makes me think of Pluto as being the planet of elimination sometimes. Sometimes some
Yes.
people will see suddenly a relationship is just this, maybe something broke the camel's back or something, it's like you've had enough. And it actually happened to a friend of mine. She just had sort of a breakup with like a really good friend of hers, like a really good, like sort of girlfriend, who she finally realized, was just not giving, it just wasn't a relationship of equals, right? and
Yeah.
and she said, it just felt like such a relief. And in some ways, when we see Pluto as, the symbol of the glyph is, kind of like this surrender, right, with like almost the arms in the air, and it can be a having to give up something. And also, I see sometimes when we have these Pluto transits, it's like, okay, either sometimes I'll see it if someone is maybe even like about to say fight some kind of a battle for, like, for my mother's estate, or for, what I might be entitled to legally, or something like that, or some kind of a battle. And it's like, is it worth me having to bring up all of the darkness within me? You know, sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like, you know what, I'm just gonna like do whatever it takes. But sometimes we realize it's just not worth it. You know, sometimes like the fight isn't worth it. Sometimes the having to go through, you know, these toxic situations, sometimes we realize it's not. Sometimes we realize our power is in walking away.
Yeah.
That's the other thing that I have just seen in practice so much with Pluto, that we can really be changed, you know, by even just the idea of, who am I through this? You know, do I want to be in a battle with someone when it means I have to be someone that I don't want to be, you know? I mean, I think of someone who's maybe lost something, you know, really dear to them. And, you know, who are you going to be if you were to say, take revenge, or if you were to say, you know, take what's entitled to you? And oftentimes, you know, we realize that it's up to us to be stewards of our own soul.
Mm,
And no matter how people judge us or what people may say, and of course, judgment can be some of that shadow of the sort of this Capricorn archetype, but ultimately, we're the ultimate judge of ourself and our soul. And I can see that with Pluto transit sometimes, is that maybe even people have a false judge of you. You know, people have a false idea of who you are. They want to judge you and think that you are, you know, some certain character, when ultimately, as long as you know that you are pure in your character, that you're standing for what's right for you, then that is really ultimately, you know, the Pluto experience. And so then when we reflect this in relationships, in things like money, of course, things like
yes.
money will likely be, for some people, you know, that can really bring up, you know, power issues, even like in friends. You know, some like we're friends, but then when you introduce money into it, then everyone, you know, like you have to
Everyone gets weird. They can be weird.
it gets weird. You got to prioritize your own goals and things. So it's like, what do we give our power over away to? Which is a very Plutonic thing. And, you know, Venus can be, you know, does someone have power over me because of money, or because of my attraction to them, or because of I want them to like me and I want us to still be friends? You know, like, what do we give our power over away to? And you know, these can be some really tricky things for people that are going through these experiences with, do we maintain friends, or are we professional friends? You know, like, I'm also seeing these sort of themes coming up too.
Oh, I remember you said, Christina sent me a meme about like a guy holding a sign like, don't hook up at the holiday party. Because, you know, like Venus and Pluto meeting, right? She's about to retrograde. It's like, you don't you mix business with pleasure. You might, you know,
Yeah.
find a little, it could get a little much, but that's what
Which
I'm
is so
noticing.
tricky. It can be tricky because I know for me,
Yeah.
I like to work with people I like, and then we have, you know, and then maybe some boundaries become a little bit like shady. I know that I always like to work with people also I know will have integrity, right? So, but you also need to maintain those boundaries, which I think, you know, maybe we'll have to learn where some of these boundaries lie.
Yes, I think boundaries is going to be a big portion of this. And really I've already seen, I mean, we're already seeing hints of this before we get to this moment of the solstice. Obviously, Venus has already conjuncted Pluto. She's been slowing down for so long, and you know, everybody around me, it seems to be more issues of relationships taking a turn, or coming up against things like money or contracts or property, home life situations, like I'm moving, buying, selling, doing things as a team, leaving people out. You know, I had an interesting experience myself. I got this is very Sag eclipse in my second house, a South Node Sag in my eclipse in my second house, ruled by Jupiter, who rules my second and my fifth. And I got, out of the blue, I got a sync licensing contract from Thrasher magazine for an old song that I did. So I'm getting paid for, yeah. So I'm getting worldwide distribution of my song in a skate video,
What?
basically. But I
That's
had a little bit,
awesome.
yeah, but my band member got a little frustrated with me because they weren't in on the contracting process. And really, it was just me wanting to keep it simple, have one point of contact, they wanted to learn some things about business. I was like, this is not the time, and so we had these guys, and it could be little things like that where it just brings up something that, he was like, I was frustrated because I was involved in the process, and I'm like, I'm trying to simplify it. I'm taking control because I'm just getting things done. And, just for an example of, kind of things that come up. But through that, through that conversation, it was like, oh, I love you so much. Like, regardless, even though you frustrate me, I'm glad this happened to us and we're creating this thing. So that's just like a little side example of,
I think that what we may see is that through these, Venus Pluto experiences, and you probably know this too as a Scorpio rising, that like sometimes when relationships really get tested, you really see whether they're, if they survive it, maybe survive it changed or survive it with new, awareness of certain boundaries or whatever. But then we could also see that like we still care for one another. I mean, I don't think it necessarily, is saying with Pluto, I don't want to put it out there that it always means a relationship's going to end or it's going to like go through a darkness. But oftentimes we need to get real about something, or our blind spots are illuminated. And it can be so great when we can finally, go through a relationship that becomes more deep or more honest or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's definitely an invitation to deepening a bond. But only if that bond is strong and you're willing to address things that are bothering you or that you might resent or that you have anger around. And that can tip the boat of a relationship. But if you're willing to do that, you might find that you come out on the other end stronger, which is definitely a Capricorn word. It's the strong is Capricorn territory. So I like that about it too. So just keep in mind, the Venus is retrograding over Pluto on Christmas. So everything that we said in your holiday
sometimes we don't know it right away, right? Because it's retrograde. Maybe like someone is like the resentment is building within them.
Well, that is true.
After the direct, and then so we're on a journey with Venus, right? And it's just started. Although I think the rumblings have already, or people are already maybe feeling some of them. So don't be too surprised when Venus comes back around later with going through that sort of running the gauntlet again with Pluto when she's direct. When is that? That's when Venus meets Pluto again.
That's going to be March 3rd, I believe, around there. So we got a good amount of time when you're looking for resolution. But I think knowing all the things that we're saying in the moment, like if you had not listened to this broadcast and you're going about life, you're going to interact differently with the energy, knowledge is power. Like, I don't know if that's the right term, but yeah. So it's good to know these things because at least it gives you context to what you're dealing with. Even if there's feelings behind it, it can help you react in a way that could end up being more beneficial for you because of Pluto's instinctual responses, So I think,
the other thing that comes up to me too, that I was thinking with this whole, Venus retrograde journey and stuff is, about like our love language. Like Venus in Capricorn's love language oftentimes is, well, number one is, expensive sunglasses, maybe for Christmas. And
looking good.
But also, I also feel it's like, when some people with, whose love languages or whatever are in these earth signs, like we show we care by, working hard. Like for me, it's like, I'll work hard. So like, say for instance, like during 2020, the pandemic in the beginning, my husband was, he was out of a job for almost a year. And for me, I was like, I'm just going to work harder and I can do it. I can take care of us. I can be the one to shoulder the extra burden, as long as, because I wanted my husband to really find a job and a career that was right for him, not just have to do whatever, like, so I was willing to shoulder some extra burden for that time. And now, fortunately, we can share the burden. Things are much nicer now. But that was just my immediate instinct, is just like, I can take care of this, I can take care of you, I can take care of myself. And so, and that might not look like the touchy-feely kind of thing that, we might think of as care. But as we know, Capricorn does care, but they may show their how they care in like working late and paying the bills or being responsible in some way, that likely may come from a place of caring. Now, if Capricorn Saturn can, when it's not really balanced, it can look like judgment, and it can look like a lot of these sort of more harsh sort of sides of it. But I think with Venus being in the picture is like, what is our love language? What do we value together as a couple?
Yeah.
What are our actual, our literal values? I mean, sometimes they say that a lot of healing and things can actually come when you feel like, guess what? I have a solid foundation. I have a roof over my head. We have enough food to eat, like that actually is something that can actually heal us biologically and also spiritually as well. So, to just look at the whole journey with that. And that can sometimes, when we don't have that language, when we think, oh, my partner, whoever is too concerned with the material. Well, sometimes the material is necessary so that we can then have, more of the softer side of life.
Yeah. Well, being partnered up with someone with Venus in Capricorn, I definitely hear that. I feel like that is one of the way he gives is by working and producing and bringing financial sustenance to the table. And so I totally get that. And I love the idea that you brought up values too, because I think that we're going on a value purge during this retrograde, and really in relation to material related things. And so I think that comes back to a lot of like quality of life, where we live, where we root down, the foundations that we're building for ourselves in life. And if those need, because a lot of foundational material has been rocked with the Saturn Uranus square, with all the major
Yes,
conjunctions
yes,
that
yes. I
happened.
wanted to get your insight on
Yeah.
that because that's
So
right here in
it's right here,
the solstice
right
chart.
here. It's all a part of it. And it's interesting to think of. And I think about my own, journey with it. And I'm in the process of looking to relocate. And as this goes down, in this time period, I'm going to go visit a place that I'm looking at as a potential and uprooting. And I'm doing it with my partner. For me, it's happening in the 4th and the 7th. So it's like home, looking for that long-term home with the Saturn in the 4th, and having to do things differently with Uranus in the 7th, and having to do it on according to someone else's thing too, because I'm a very
So
independent
I'm
person.
sensing that, like, because I'm seeing all this Capricorn that is like, okay, let's be responsible and get our values clear and everything, and kind of wanting, to sort of ground down. But then you've got the Saturn Uranus square coming exact. So there's a sense there's something unsettled too, though. We kind of also
Absolutely.
have to we got to be nimble. We got to be aware or prepared for some big changes, or
Yeah.
a total, because
Well,
Uranus likes to flip the script too.
well, and I think that's part of it, because we have to keep in mind that this is not something new that's coming to the forefront. We're working with, they're disrupting energies, but they're disrupting energies that have made themselves known for quite some time. So that's the beauty of this Capricorn season in my mind, where it is a time where it's cardinal earth energy, and we do get to take active steps towards a foundation, or what we're building and manifesting in the physical realm. And we could just find ourselves at this disruptive point that has been building for so long, but it's disruptive in the sense that I don't think it fully shocks us. It might give us some things that we weren't looking for, because Uranus always does that. But for the most part, that larger story and what's being uprooted is already underway. And we can use the Capricorn energy to make our move in a sense, or at least get the plan in place of how we're going to continually, you know, what we're going to do through these major shifts that we're all experiencing in some way, or at least.
Because I'm noticing with Uranus retrograde and Saturn direct this time,
Yeah.
right? So and Saturn is in its rulership, its ancient rulership of Aquarius. So I'm guessing that it might be more Saturnian. One of the things I've been looking at is, now I haven't looked at the astrology for the entire thing, but I know it's something's coming up. Is have you heard about the Theranos trial with that woman Elizabeth Holmes?
I saw a little mention of it.
Okay, well, I'll just give you like a brief, like the gist of it is, you know, she was hailed as a Silicon Valley innovator. You know, this
Mhm.
woman that started a blood testing company that said you could test like for anything with like just a drop of a pinprick from like the finger, and that they were going to help, you know, prevent all this disease and da da. Da. She raised billions of dollars, up to like $9 billion. And it turned out the whole thing was a fraud. She was nowhere near making these claims, were just like actually scientifically impossible.
Yeah.
So like, but she ran this basically this multi-billion-dollar scam for like, you know, over a decade. Well, her trial is happening now. She's got the best defense that money can buy. They think it's costing her like $10 million or whatever. It seems pretty obvious that she ran a scam. However, she's also, you know, this defense like, oh, I was abused by my partner and blah blah blah, and that's, you know, and I wasn't thinking straight or whatever. She's putting the blame on everybody else. I'm
Mm.
just kind of curious because it's coming to the closing arguments now. They think it might just get, you know, and just hopefully before Christmas. So it's like
Interesting.
right around this time. And I honestly, I want to see this woman be put away. I really do, because I totally don't buy her whole, I mean, she was messing with people's health, you know, ultimately. And there were people who got some really bad test results, saying some people said they had AIDS when they didn't. A woman, you know, messing with people's pregnancies, like really, really terrible stuff. I mean, this is a criminal trial, and for me, this is very aligned with the symbolic of. I had seen before when Saturn was retrograde and Uranus direct, it was like a get out of jail free card kind of thing seemed to be coming up for in different scenarios. I'm wondering if Saturn now will have a little bit more power with this situation. So, I mean, I can't, you know, obviously I can't predict from just, you know, these transits or whatever you would do other charts for it, but for an outcome. However, to me, it's very symbolic. You know, will all this Saturn and Capricorn finally show certain people have consequences, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing we have to keep in mind with this particular square, and the fact that we have a stellium in Capricorn at this time, is that it all comes back to Saturn. You know, Uranus is in Venus's sign, Venus is in Saturn's sign, along with the Sun, Mercury, and Pluto. And so Saturn is the kind of the final say here. And it makes me think too of just a lot of shakeups that have been happening in the financial world, and most importantly in the cryptocurrency world, where there was a breach of security in a and a hacker stole what was it, like $119 million in cryptocurrency, and hasn't given it back or anything like that. And, you know, because they're trying to figure out, how do we centralize this cryptocurrency, like keep it decentralized, but where can I put it, you know? And so basically this hack happened that it wasn't even like from behind the scenes, like they hacked into the website itself, and and got trusts, or got verification of trust through the users, that to basically just, you know, take the money. And so there's a lot of cybersecurity situations that are going on with Saturn and Aquarius, I'm knowing, and how when there's breaches of those, you know, this has been a big issue. And we've had in 2021 alone, there's been multiple cryptocurrency thefts from hacking, and we're trying to figure out where's that even going. We're trying to find out how, you know, there's a big push with inflation right now, and just properties being off the charts, with especially here in Southern California, what properties are selling for. Like they put it on the market for like 500, and then it like goes to like 650. You know, people are just outbidding each other. Like it's insane right now. And this
Oh,
is
you
all
know what?
that.
One of the things I noticed that I was looking at earlier this year was, that was very symbolic of the Saturn Uranus square was the whole idea of gig workers. Do they have any rights, right?
Mm,
And I think in California, there was at first a judge ruled that they didn't have the same rights, or something like that. The Uber and some of those other, Uber was the main one, but some of these other companies that were like, oh, well, these are just, contract workers. We don't have to give them any kind of benefits or any kind of sick leave or blah, blah, blah. And so there's been this ongoing battle sort of back and forth. Um, and I just saw that just recently in the UK, it says that gig economy workers are getting employee rights under the EU proposal. So that, to me, that's sort of that Saturnian saying, okay, can we actually make this into something that's more structured rather than these people just coming in, making some money and having, like people, they want to have their freedom, but also, when it gets to the point where it's like, well, wait a second, what about with COVID? What about if I get sick? What about, what's going to happen? I need some more protections. So to me, it's like that freewheeling, it sounds exciting at first with Uranus, oh, be your own boss and we can be free. And, we don't have to show up and, time clock or whatever. But then, there's also limits to that. If we don't have the Saturnian structures and the safeguards, then what happens in case, we need some assurances, we need some protections, and that could be a better, a good sort of expression of Saturn. Oh, and in Aquarius, these are sort of like collective themes. And Saturn can also be like the law, can the law come to just give these people protection just enough, they can still be free, but but they have certain protections so that they are treated humanely.
yeah.
So I think that's one of the things I'm seeing sort of on a macro level.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen several articles on different workforces entertaining labor unions, because that's the thing, is that's the idea of Aquarius, is it's the collective, it's the communal energy coming together to look
And then
for
also with
those.
Jupiter there, maybe Jupiter's giving them a little boost too. Jupiter and
Yeah,
Aquarius.
that's
Because I'm
helping.
seeing, yeah, I just saw it says that the EU wants millions of gig economy workers to get paid leave and minimum wage, So it's like you're not just um, sort of hanging out there like, willy-nilly. You actually are part of something. And that, in what we need to understand is that with numbers, we can have power in numbers when it
Mhm.
comes to, even if we're individually, we think we're so small, ourselves individually, when we come together, there can be a lot of power in, people power, which we'll
Yeah.
hopefully see more of with, with
Well,
this Aquarius.
and this is what I like about Uranus, and I'm an Uranian person to begin with, is we think about a disruption and but this is the beauty of Uranus, is we need to disrupt in order to find the better system. So we're disrupting the labor. We're disrupting the financial situation. We're disrupting the housing market because we're trying to find better solutions. And I feel like Saturn Aquarius is solution oriented, being an air sign that is looking at a wider range of possibilities. And it's not, and it's in obviously labor unions. It's in getting better securities, which is a very Taurus and just any earth sign type of thing. It's the people at the candle factory in Kentucky and those crazy tornadoes, and why 100 and something people were working in the middle of the night, where many of them are saying, I asked to go home, but I was threatened with the loss of my job if I were to get myself in a safe position. And it's all these things that Uranus disrupts and shakes us to the core to bring up to the surface, so that we have the tension and the activating motion of Saturn in that overcoming square to be able to do something about it. So it's not for naught, I guess, is what we're saying here. It's like there's a purpose to it, to get to the Saturnian piece to help bring better order and
Right, because
fairness around it.
Saturn, if it were just Saturn, sometimes these Saturnian things can get a little too compacted into, so then it's like, oh, the
Yeah,
people in power, all of a sudden they're controlling everything for their benefit. But then you have this Uranian element to say, wait a second, let's break up this, this way of control that isn't going in the right direction. Maybe we
exactly.
need a reshift so that it's actually what the intention is for equality, is for protecting people and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And so everything that we just talked about for a very long time here is the beginning days of Capricorn season. I mean, it's a bigger story overall, but we may see a lot of these themes hit their apex or their next turning point in basically December 21st through the end of the year, because these are slow influences, both with Saturn Uranus square and also Venus near Pluto, because she just stationed, so she's moving super slow. So this is an ongoing theme here. So let us move along here with our cap season. I'm like, what? Where were we? So some interesting things happened too that actually we didn't quite get into. So I'm just going to break down a couple things and we can kind of piece it out, Christina, where we feel inspired to. But one of the things that happens, which I'm just going to change my calculations here real quick, is that around this time, the first couple of days after the solstice, is that the mean node actually moves into Taurus and Scorpio. So Gray and I talked about this a little bit, where the mean versus the true node. And so the mean node's going to change axis early on, and then the true node is going to do so later in Capricorn season, right before Capricorn season ends. But I'm just going to put that out there, that there is this nodal energy that is slowly making a shift, while we also have Jupiter about to move into Pisces and squaring these
Wearing the
nodes.
nodes. Yes,
Yeah.
I think that anytime we have a planet squaring the nodes, that really seems to, it's almost like an emphasis of that planet and what that planet, means, and what the planet signifies. I tend to find it very, like as they say, like even with eclipses, what they also like to look at is when the sun is square the nodes, because that's kind of like in between the eclipse seasons too, and we tend to see things shift that have to do with the story of whatever the eclipse season is, and so, or the eclipse seasons, and so I would imagine that Jupiter is going to be especially, especially once Jupiter gets into Pisces, free from Saturn's sort of grip, right?
Yeah.
And back in Jupiter's home sign. Um, Overall, we tend to see Jupiter as positive. Oh, and it looks like, oh, thank you for putting the little bounds in there. So it looks like the first decan, or I don't know what you call that, but I'm not a traditional astrologer, but that's ruled by Venus, right? So I would
Yeah,
think.
that bound is in. So yeah, so basically we go from Jupiter hanging out in Saturn territory in Saturn's bound. It's about as term to Saturn
Mm.
as you could possibly, be. And then all of a sudden on the 28th, it switches
My birthday, by
into.
the way. Woohoo!
Oh, exciting.
Of
Happy
course, my
birthday,
solar return
Christina.
is on the 27th, but that's okay.
I know, yeah, that you're like at the
Probably
last
celebrating on
degree of, yeah. But once it moves into Pisces, it moves into its own domicile. It's in the terms of Venus. It's actually in the decan of Saturn, though, which is interesting to think about. I don't have the decans up here, but so there's still a little Saturn flavor, but overall, Jupiter just opens up. So, I mean, any thoughts, Christina, on just Jupiter's switch and how it's going to interact with the nodes?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, okay, so it's out of sign a little bit though, right? Because the nodes had switched into, but still, it's essentially
It's funny
square.
because I have the nodes at mean right now, but if you put it on true, and I go by true nodes, so I'm just
Okay,
going to
okay,
say
true.
that
I
is
go by
my
true nodes
I
too.
go by. So we're going to
So
stick to true nodes from here on out, but just for the just for observation's sake and for when we're tracking this. It's interesting to think that either Jupiter is going to make a square at the end of fixed signs, or it's going to make the square at the last breath of the Gemini, the mutable. So
Yeah, I'm
it's
looking at
interesting.
this. To me, I feel like we will sense it with this 0 degrees of Pisces, because it's almost like, I would think, with Jupiter, really kind of getting the squeeze. We're not getting much Jupiter juice with Jupiter
No, it's like a trickle.
down, right? And then hopefully we will sense, I mean, we noticed it, what was it, last summer, when Jupiter went into Pisces. You know what I noticed at that time? I think there might have also been some Chiron thing happening too, though. But like I think it was like the very day or within days of Jupiter entering Pisces, Oprah came out with that special of hers that was like, where she partnered with Prince
Oh yeah,
um, Harry
Harry.
on like grief and healing and trauma, and the importance of sharing your grief and things like that, because Pisces can be very much about all of these swirling emotions that need expression, and Jupiter can magnify that. But it was done in such a way of with the intention of healing, and so to me that felt very Pisces. And if anything, this nodal story is going to just really amplify that Jupiter and Pisces. Now, it doesn't always have to only be about grief. I mean, there can be some beautiful like escapism with I use that term a lot with Pisces in general, but because it's in Venus's bound and it's being squared by the nodes, there could be some great joy, some relief of this connection with humanity at times. I mean, we often see, I've seen in the past many times with, say, for instance, stations of Neptune and Pisces, like sometimes there may be like some collective grief experience that then brings people all together.
Yeah.
That then we sense our humanity. Suddenly we don't judge one another if people are gay or trans or black or white or whatever. There can be almost this like oneness. That would be the potential of a positive of that, of maybe having if maybe something may occur that may make us then have this great gratitude or this overpouring of gratitude, that there is something to be grateful for.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if there isn't something like that, maybe there's something within us that triggers us to remember what we're grateful for, even if it's something that doesn't necessarily come to us, but we look around and realize that despite the struggles of the world, which are and feel very real, it does come down to the way that we engage with it, and how we are the observer of our own world, and being able to find gratitude uh, every day for the things in our life, the people that are around us, and all the blessings that we actually do have. And so I'm hoping Jupiter, having a little more Jupiter in there will remind us of that. And that's just, yeah. So there, but
I'm hoping, I wonder if people will have now, so we're almost to the end of the year. And so my thought is, I wonder if people will think, oh, well, let's go on let's have this great New Year's Eve festivities or parties or something like that, whether it's a smart thing to do or not, with the Omicron variant, still happening. I almost think with Jupiter and Pisces, it's going to be hard to sort of hold people back or hold back, whatever it is that's rising and needing expression. But I don't know. I would be a little nervous myself, because we've also got Mercury conjunct Pluto at the same time too, and that can be, sort of a difficult position for Mercury there.
yeah. So basically we have Venus, Mercury, and Pluto all together around December 28th, 29th, as Jupiter moves into Pisces here. But we also have Mars and a sextile to Saturn too. So there is this variation of like, yeah, Jupiter's like, okay, I want to do this. I'm feeling, like I would love to party, but maybe it's more of an intimate one where I'm very selective of the people that I gather with, because ultimately my drive of Mars is working in line with, the limitations of Saturn there. And so how do we find like just a gentle balance within, the limitations that are upon us, while also getting a little bit of our Jupiter juice without it going overboard. And that might be part of just the square with the nodes that are happening too, where it's just like, there's tension with just where we're at.
I also see this with Jupiter. I mean, maybe not so much in Pisces, but major Jupiter transits with like just big news. There could be some big news, and whether that has to do with the variant or hopefully there could be some big good news or some news that could really just sort of shift the story, that we've been sort of telling ourselves with that, with those nodes sort of really amplifying that Jupiter.
Yeah, chances are, I think you're absolutely right about something big in the news at that time too, because around the 29th, we also have the moon in Scorpio, which will be lighting up the Saturn Uranus square too, and thinking about maybe some more restrictions coming in, or just maybe a different framework that's starting to form within the restrictions that we already have. And so there's, I don't know, there just seems to be some sort of delivery from an organization, of whether it's the government, a corporation, just a general public awareness message type of situation, or maybe even more of the court cases that are, there's plenty of court cases, including the one that you brought up earlier, that are underway too. So I think something big, 28th, 29th, wait for it. See what it will be.
All
So
right.
what's up next? All right. So what's up next? Well, we make it. Well, what I like is that we have on New Year's Day, we actually have the sun in a trine to Uranus, which is kind of a fun way to start the new year, like
especially with all that sober Capricorn. You want to lighten up the mood a little bit, and that could be good. I like a trine with Uranus.
Yeah, it feels good. If it feels like it takes our resolutions sort of to the next level. Like like we are in touch with the Uranian side, we are in touch with what we want to see differently in our physical realities. And we've got the tension of Saturn like pulling on that too, and being actually kind of the dictating force, obviously, because we have the sun in Capricorn, which is Saturn's sign. But I don't know, it feels like a willingness to like change it up. And I think that's exciting way to start the new year.
Yeah, especially because Venus is still retrograde, and so there may still be some, especially if we're looking in terms of money. I think people might be a little bit still on the fearful side, or just not know what to expect. People may, I feel like with the Venus retrograde in Capricorn, especially, this time of year, all the talk of inflation, people may be a little bit like sort of nervous when it comes to resources, spending, things like that. But then we have this little bit of like this uplift and this, excitement, wanting to do things differently, wanting to do things in a new way, in a fresh way. And then when usually in earth signs, we maybe could take some practical action to start our new year or something.
Yeah, well, and so this is also a fun way that the year is turning over too. So not only do we have the sun making that trine to Uranus, we have the next day On the second, we have a new moon in Capricorn. So we're in the dark hours of the moon to begin with on the first day. And we get that Uranian hit, but we're also in like seed planting mode. And we're in, and so we're rebirthing into this Uranian energy there. And I know this new moon's potent for your chart, Christina.
Woo, woo, woo.
You're like, woo,
That
woo.
is, yeah, it's on my ascendant. And on that Sunday, if I can make a little plug, that Sunday, January 2nd, I'm hosting my 2022 workshop for the year ahead, where we'll be like
Ooh.
making our plan for the year ahead. We'll look at like the major transits of the year, and we'll just kind of like actually try to align our goals with the transits and things like that. So, I know a lot of astrologers were doing theirs like in November and December, but I kind of thought, you know what, let me just do it during the new moon, because then we can do like a new moon manifestation and all this stuff. And plus, by that time, we've also got Mercury going into Aquarius, which to me, I really like for like thinking differently, thinking in new ways, innovative ways. So it does feel like a good new start, that first new moon. Hopefully people will be, over their hangovers from New Year's Eve. They got a couple days to deal with that. But I like that Mercury, and Mercury's in Mercury's own bounds there too, with in
That's
Aquarius.
right. Yeah. So Mercury's like, okay, I'm feeling fresh. It's in its triplicity that it likes in air signs. It's in its own bounds. It is ready to party. It's also ready to retrograde soon. So there are there are a lot of things that Mercury is considering within its overreaching forward plan. But it's in good processing power, I would say, especially being so ahead of the sun, and just kind of having that forward reach that we might have to obviously take time with to go through, because what's going to happen is we're going to have Mercury retrograde almost before it makes it to Saturn, but it's going to station direct on Pluto. So there is really something about that late 28th, 29th of the year that is going to be revisited once Mercury stations direct on Pluto in February. So just FYI, take your time with what you're sculpting, but at the same time, what's coming up is going to be very potent, because I think it's going to lead to some big decisions that eventually come out of it.
And I love that new moon is still, forming a trine to Uranus, like how
Yeah.
you were saying, activating that Saturn Uranus square, but really like, it's kind of a trine to Uranus to me is just like, okay, if I've tried things so many, or if I'm stuck or something, or hitting a ceiling, or hitting a limit, or whatever, with my creativity or with my earning power, whatever it is, then that Uranus can help to let's innovate, let's do things differently, let's play with how we work with the material world, and that being a signature of that new moon, kind of like really being a signature for this whole lunation cycle.
I love that. How are we going to play with the material world? Because this is a Capricorn new moon. This is at the beginning of the year with Jupiter squaring the nodes. Like, life is ready to move forward. Yeah, we've got, Venus still retrograde, Mercury still got some things to figure out, but there's something about this lunar cycle that is going to be very potent, with some real world changes that we're going to be implementing in our lives. So if that's the case, like, what do you want to set up for yourself? How do you can play with the reality, like you can manipulate it to how you want it to be, or you don't have to be fully at its whim or control. Like, remember that you co-create. And this feels like a powerful lunation to co-create with.
Yeah, and to get free, in some way,
Yeah.
like, I've been hearing so much about, like, I don't know what's up with employers, that they want their their employees to come back to the office, and to come back, like once it's safe, come back to the office because we need to see you here. Fit, like, why? Especially if a lot of employees are now saying, I don't want to come back to the office, or I want Fridays off, or because sometimes if that can actually help with productivity sometimes. If you feel like you're more creative, they even say that most people aren't, very productive or even creative for like 8 hours a day. There's really only like 3 hours where you're really getting like really good
I feel
creativity.
that.
Yeah, and so it's like, do I have to be stuck in an office for that? Maybe for certain things, but 40 hours a week, let's hope that really is starting to, like, the people who don't want that, maybe they'll be able to make some changes there, because I think now that people, they were forced to be at home and not deal with commutes and not deal with like 9 to 5, a lot of them just don't ever want to go back, and they'd be even willing to quit their jobs or change careers for that. So now it's like employers, it's like, okay, the ball's in your court. Are you going to are you going to prioritize your people's happiness? Otherwise, they might be gone,
Yeah. Well, I think you raise a really good point about just those changes, and how I think we're going to see in the news just so many changes happening in corporate structure and job structure, and the things like, wait, yeah, maybe people don't want to come back to the office, and they fight that, and then they win, and then what happens to that office, because you don't need that anymore. And so we're going to see property changes, a structural hierarchical changes. And so I think it's going to be definitely a reorienting of labor, and property, and money. And so it's just going to continue along those lines, because they do have real world repercussions when we make those decisions for ourselves. Because it's like, if no one wants to come in the office, what do we have the office for? Things like
Right,
that.
exactly. And actually it kind of makes sense, because a lot of the property, that's a huge overhead
Yes,
for companies, and that could actually help to lower their costs then. So, so then maybe what would be the next step? Maybe employees start saying, well, maybe I should be paid more if now your overhead for the company isn't so big, like, prove me wrong or something.
I know.
What's the one where, like, with Bernie Sanders or whatever, is like, tell me I'm not right, or what
Oh
is it?
yeah. Or I know what you're saying, but I can't
Prove me
figure it.
wrong or something like that.
All right.
But yeah, making these changes in what we've always known to be true, what we've always accepted as not changeable, which may likely have to do with things like work authority, these, Capricornian things. Can the, maybe they don't need to be completely uprooted, but maybe they can be updated and changed in a way that actually like fits for now, for the times that we're living in.
Absolutely. Because that's what I feel. I feel like that's what Uranus is. I love to refer to it as 2.0. Like, what's our 2.0? How do we evolve this situation? How do we level up? Because if something's not working, we have to innovate. And that is what Uranus is good at doing. And having the trine there, it feels like there is a willingness of authority to kind of step up, especially in Capricorn, to be like, all right, well, I'm taking charge. We're going to make some changes, and hopefully this flows well, with the trine to that. So exciting new moon. I'm here for it. It also leads us to that full moon, which we are
Well,
inching
wait
our
a
way
second. When does
towards.
Mercury go retrograde? What do we have that
So
date?
Mercury is going to go retrograde early on the 14th of January. Here in the chart, it's going to do so
Okay,
at
well,
10 degrees.
pretty close to Saturn, like you were
Pretty
saying.
close to Saturn, but not quite there. So
Okay.
Mercury and the Saturn story are going to take a little bit longer to fully perfect, but it's going to get that Saturnian vibes for sure, because it is retrograding through Saturn signs. So it's Saturn all the way, but I feel like it doesn't get the full decision until it gets through the Mercury retrograde on Pluto, and then to meet Saturn later in, I believe it's February when that happens. So we're on the lead up to that for sure. So after the new moon, we basically cruise forward to Venus. So next is kind of Venus moves. So Venus is going to sextile Neptune on the 5th of January here. So she kind of she touches down with dreamy Neptune before she heads to the conjunction with the sun at 18 degrees of Capricorn on January 8th. So we got a lot of Venus
Is that your
energy back.
moon? What degree is your moon?
My moon's late degrees 16, but it's close enough. I would consider this, definitely
Yes,
conjunct my moon.
baby.
Yes, and I'm going on a trip. I'm going on a trip on January 8th to go look at a potential relocation spot with my
Oh,
partner. So
oh
that
my God,
feels
it's perfect.
interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, of course it all came together, and then he just presented dates, and I was like, of course, in a Venus perfection year, when Venus meets the sun, we would take this trip. But like astrology, you
Aw.
can't make this stuff up. It would have happened without astrology. Oh, it doesn't happen without
Right. It
astrology,
was
but
just been happened and
it
then
just
thought
happens.
about it.
You don't have to um but what do you think about Venus kind of like touch it, like having like a workable touchdown with Neptune and then conjuncting the sun after it?
Mhm. Oh yeah, because they're basically both kind of um sextiling the sun.
Yeah, they kind of cross paths, and then the sun will sextile Neptune after. So it's like like
Wow.
she has the Neptune message, they conjunct, and then the sun touches down
Mhm.
to that.
I love I often think of it as sort of just like the softening when we look at that just in general, the sextile between Capricorn and Pisces. That, Pisces can help to bring that sense of like enchantment or whatever that's missing in sort of the stark world of like Capricorn.
Mm.
And so to me, I feel like it can add a sense of like serendipity. And even if because we've had so much of emphasis in Capricorn, and then this may help us to feel like we can dream again. And that they say, I mean, I'm not sure what the traditional idea is of when Venus conjuncts the sun, because like I guess they say when a planet is whatever a certain amount of degrees from the sun, it's kind of burnt by the sun.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I often feel like it is almost a union. And of course, yeah, the sun is sort of like the brighter element, but there is something that is maybe like, within the heart. There's some real, like we've been playing around with our values and the values we share with others, but there may be some kind of real something like actually really kind of clinches. And I really love the idea that Neptune is sort of involved with that, and it can also bring, sometimes Neptune can really make dreams come true.
I agree. I'm like, Neptune can throw us for a loop sometimes, absolutely. But I have definitely witnessed a lot of like miracle kind of things happen, or just very creative possibilities, or things just
Yeah.
come out of the blue where it's like just like you said, serendipitous in a sense. And this is a sextile, so it's like, serendipity may knock at your door, you still have to answer. It's not going to be like, oh, I have this lovely solution or this thing, and then it just happens. You're like, oh, this is an opportunity that might have manifested kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I got to figure some of it out still, but there seems to be it's an interesting component. And just to set it up a little bit, even in more context, with the Neptune side of things, is what happens is we have Venus sextile Neptune on the 5th, Sun Venus on the 8th, and then then on the 11th and the 12th, we basically have the Sun sextile Neptune at the same time that Mars squares Neptune. So there's an
Wow.
interesting forward movement that is in contrast to the Neptune side of things. So it does muck up our picture just just a
Yeah.
little bit. Not completely, but I find it interesting, Christina, to have Mars squaring Neptune at the same time. And maybe we just don't want to do anything and we're in the Neptunian haze, and maybe that's it, you know?
It could be. I mean, I have Mars opposite Neptune natally, and um, I don't know with Mars Neptune hard aspects. I don't always find them necessarily bad. It's just that, we might not get like all the traction, like you said, like maybe it's just not the right time to like be taking a lot of action and having that really go in the direction we want, or something like that. I don't know.
Well,
What do you normally see with that?
it's interesting because there's so many ways we can unpack this. Because another element that I'm going to throw in there to like, because astrology gets messy sometimes, is that we have a first quarter moon also happening in Aries. So we're pushing off a first quarter moon that is Mars ruled, and the moon is exactly trine Mars.
Hmm.
So there is a forward movement, and maybe it is acting on some sort of like thing that comes out of the blue, or the serendipitous moment, or a dream, or a creative project, or something along those lines. But we also have to be a little cautious of what we just jump into right away too with that Aries moon, because Aries is quick. It's quick to draw. It's quick to draw. It's like it's just so it's a little tricky. You really have to try to discern the situation as best as you can and really trust your instincts,
Hmm.
while
Or
also
it could
having.
be, or the Neptune could be the serendipitous, um, element that you need. I mean, I don't always like to see them. I guess I've learned from experience that, like, square with Neptune isn't always like bad. Sometimes it can be like, this is actually a dream that can come true eventually. But the thing with, I think we were talking about before we even got on the call, about Mars in Sagittarius, that can sometimes be like shooting from the hip, or like over, like Sagittarius likes to aim high, or maybe overshooting. And
Mm,
then with the Neptune, maybe we could be, just like, oh yeah, I think I want to go for this thing. And maybe we're either aiming too high, or maybe we don't realize how far reaching our actions can be taken. I mean, I don't necessarily want to say it's bad, but it can be very far reaching. But I was just thinking of, like, when we do think about the shadow of Mars and Sagittarius, sometimes it's like you said, it's like the reaction before we fully think things through, kind of thing.
yeah. It also makes me think of the old adage that's very Capricornian, is only time will tell, right? Like sometimes we just have to live through it. We have to act on it. We have to use our best that we can, even when things just, the picture's not fully clear, and just let time work it out. And the one thing I do like about the Mars Neptune square that's happening around this first quarter from the 9th through the 11th of January is that they're both under the domicile of Jupiter now in Pisces in its own sign. So they're working on the same, they're working from the same orders of Jupiter. It just squared the nodes. So it has its own kind of destiny shaping energy that it's been working under. So it just adds even more to that kind of forward momentum that seems to be really key right now in the celestial story.
I like it.
I know, I kind of like it too. I mean, I want to like it. I want to be on vacation, so I'm saying I'm
Oh,
in the camp of liking
mhm.
it. So yeah, so it's an interesting little setup, basically from the 5th through the 12th, that gets us in touch with Neptune, Mars, Venus, and the Sun.
So
So that,
Mercury is about stationing. Well, no.
yeah.
So when does Mercury actually station retrograde? You said the 14th.
So the
Okay.
14th of
Just in time.
January is when we have that Mercury station retrograde there. And yeah, so once again, we're in a year of air at retrogrades. Um, so any thoughts on retrograde in
You
Aquarius?
remember what happened last time? I can't remember what happened the last time with Mercury was retrograde in Aquarius, because now I think this year is one where it goes from air to earth or something, isn't it? Like, sort of like
Yeah, it's not pure
traveling.
air. It's air to earth, which I actually like. I'm kind of excited about how those how that's going to work out. Well, we'll see. Well, only time
Because
will tell.
Mercury and Aquarius is like it's like purely ideas, and it can be those great innovative ideas. Like, there's so much talk of, say, a new a pill that we can take instead of getting a vaccine, or, like, I don't know if it's instead of getting the vaccine. Maybe I'm saying that wrong, but it's like, if people get COVID, then they could take the
It'll
pill.
lessen the And
Yeah, like
saw a
basically
thing about, I just saw a thing the other day about a pill too for birth or for abortion and things like that. Like there seems to be pills around, very Neptune.
It's
Seems to
very
be pills around.
scientific,
It
like these
is.
scientific ideas that kind of, are innovative ideas, whatever. And in when Mercury's retrograde, we think different, and in Aquarius, or even more so, these ideas can affect our lives, and they can be, really affecting our reality. And then when Mercury then goes into Capricorn, though, then maybe there is some kind of reality check there.
Yeah.
Is this, can we actually, does the rubber hit the road? Is this actually going to fly? Or is this not ready for prime time yet? Or that kind of thing.
No, absolutely. And that's really what I think the blessing is of this air to earth situation is exactly what you just said. Because it's like, yeah, earth has air has all the possibilities, but how does it work in real time and in manifesting here in reality, and does it stick? So that's an exciting part about it. But really a lot of the Mercury retrograde will also happen under Aquarius watch. So we only have a little bit to talk to about that. But one of the things that's interesting about Mercury stationing is it's actually in proximity to Chiron over there in Aries. So one thing Mercury's doing is making a sextile to Chiron from the 9th of January through the 18th. And it's going to be in the full moon signature that we're about to talk about. But I mean, how do you feel about Chiron? Or do you have any insights into how Mercury might be touching down on this influence?
You know, um, I'm wondering if, when I think about how Chiron interacts with, just in general, the Aquarian archetype, that could be, that wounding in the sense of feeling alienated or isolated or something like that. Or it could be speaking to the need to help people in society who feel in that way, in some way alienated. I mean, we've all to a certain extent felt alienated,
Yeah.
not being able to engage socially, as we normally do. But that's sort of a theme that seems to be, present with Chiron engaging with that archetype.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And also this interesting, it makes me think about how we can work as a collective in the communal energies of Aquarius while also realizing the impact and the wounding of the individual, which touches into what you were just saying there too. And yeah, just and it being a sextile, so we can actually work with that. And I don't know, I think we can have like some personal healing insights of our place in the world and how we fit into and our belonging, which is a very Aquarian thing. With that sextile, and obviously when it does the eventual perfection, when Mercury's direct and heads back towards Saturn. But just something to, if you are into tracking Chiron, definitely pay attention to around the station points of Mercury, because there is definitely a Chironic message that is coming into the framework around that same time. But this does bring us to where we originally skipped ahead, which is our full moon
Spoiler.
in Cancer, in the moon's domicile, but in the bounds of Saturn. And obviously, we see the sun and Pluto conjunct there because the sun conjuncts Pluto the day before the full moon on the 16th of January, and then the full moon is on Monday, the 17th. And so, obviously Pluto is a big story here. We got Mercury recently retrograde, and in that sextile to Chiron, pretty tight there. And we have also Venus, she is slowly getting to the end of her retrograde, not quite there yet. But, she's in a loose trine with Uranus too, which is how she started off the shadow. So that's interesting. But obviously the biggest part here would be the Plutonian energy going on.
Yes, I'm just looking up, real quick, like some
Oh, and just
parts.
another little thing to add to there is the following day on the 18th, that is when Uranus stations direct. So we also have Uranus stationing at this time, which is always another big influence that
Wow.
happens.
Wow.
And the true node will move to Taurus and Scorpio that day too. So really the 16th, 17th, 18th all has, and then the sun trines the north node, which is now just moved on the 19th. So this is the end of Capricorn season. It is lit, literally, by the
Ooh. Yeah,
moon.
I mean, it really makes me think of when we had that whole 2020, when we had all those eclipses in Capricorn, Cancer, when we had the Saturn Pluto conjunction, these storylines that to me said a lot about, abuse of power, these plutocracies in society that maybe have always long run our society, our government, people with money, plutocracies are like, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't even know the term before, but it's like, that basically people with money and they can buy their way into anything in this country. They can buy their way into positions of power, of authority in the government, things like that. Um, maybe there'll be some illumination around that. We also saw at the time when it was the North Node in Cancer, South Node in Capricorn, when, a lot of women stepped up into positions of leadership. To me, that was such like the integration of the Capricorn and the Capricorn and the Cancer archetype. It's like these like mother types or mothers that then suddenly we're all being elected to positions in the House of Representatives. There's like the women belong in the House, but yeah, the House of Government.
Yeah, I know. I love that.
So all these blending of all these archetypes of and so, maybe it does have something to do. Oftentimes, we see the moon having to do with like the people in general,
Yeah.
issues around women. There could be another having to just be, an illumination of some kind of people in power abusing their power. Um, Gosh, I just saw yet another article of another sort of Me Too kind of thing where Mr. Big from Sex and the City is like accused of rape, and it's just like, oh God, is there any guy that's not can we admire any guy that like isn't like hasn't been a bad boy. I'm saying that I totally support the calling out of these things, but it's so sad every time it happens. But so however it chooses to manifest itself, these are really major themes of how power is used in the world. And with Capricorn, we know, because we have Capricorn, that there's got to be someone who calls the shots, who has the vision, who organizes, so that we can actually get things done in the world. But, with Pluto, when that power is abused, it can really corrupt. That's as they say, power is corrupt. Power corrupts, it has throughout
Absolute
time.
power corrupts absolutely, right? Is that what the
Yeah, and
yeah.
it to me, I feel like the balance for that is to always check into the Cancer side of ourselves. Are we doing things that care for people? Are we having enough softness so that we make room for our humanity and others' humanity to exist, within, whatever structure that we're organizing, because that was the intention in the first place. If the intention then just becomes powerful people just get more power and get more money and things like that, then obviously we've forgotten the original intention. So that's definitely something worth paying attention to there. And the transformation of organizations, of work, potentially all of these, like, again, these sort of Capricornian themes,
Mm.
maybe an illumination of what's toxic, of what it needs to be eliminated, that has been so prevalent.
Yeah, I think that beautifully said, because one of the things I think about when it comes to Cancer and Capricorn too, that plays into what you were just talking about, is the idea of unconditional and conditional. And what terms are we setting here? What is the overall structure? Is there any is there any room for care? Are we given care? Do we even care? And the cancer will bring that to the forefront. And it'll probably bring more of those situations with home and family and kind of the work from home situation. I know this is the last day of the mask mandate in California, which is interesting
Really?
that just happens to be the date. It also makes me think about moving too, because this is usually a big shift when it comes to careers or relocation. But most of all, what comes to mind with this, within the context of the US, of course, is that this is a full moon that is lighting up the Pluto return, the first pass that is just a few weeks away. So I think in the US in particular, when it comes to what you were just talking about with these structures and certain corruptions and things that have to be exposed, etc., it's going to be, I think, a kind of a landslide of illumination that sets up some pretty big things to contend to and to that need to be acted upon and with care.
Mm-hmm. And so what we have been seeing with the Pluto return, one of the themes to me, I feel like has been the signature of this Pluto return is, first of all, how this country was built on racism, basically, on slave labor. And that has been something that we've had a reckoning around. And I think this, whatever these major themes that have been kind of in the collective, a full moon will actually make them feel a lot more present, a lot more personal. Mercury is also retrograde at this time, so maybe we will have some, maybe there will be some more news or movement around, that insurrection from last January. That was another thing that seemed to be really aligned with this, Saturn return. Another thing, this Pluto return. The other thing with the Pluto return being, a lot of these like sort of Confederate statues coming down,
Oh, and then being melted down. I saw ones being melted down to
Oh
be
my God.
repurposed to because we can still use the metal, make it
Yeah.
into a different shape. And like that's the kind of thing with all this, right? Is we can
Oh.
actually make something into a literal different form. And especially with Uranus stationing. And also, when we think about another mother archetype of Ceres being in a trine to the sun at this time and sextile the moon too. So there's another interesting like kind of nurturance, food and sustenance kind of related factor that's part of this too. But yeah, what are we melting down into new form? Because obviously something's dying with Pluto, but it's also
And
going to be reborn.
this could also be another sort of touch point with, that Venus retrograde for those people who are having, who it's affecting them either in their love relationships or maybe their, financial situation or whatever it is happening personally. This can really bring up, the emotion. Full moon usually brings our emotions to the forefront. They can feel very emotional. And then with the Mercury retrograde, so this could be a very, very tricky, touchy time for a relationship. So you just want to make sure that you're not just reacting to all the anxiety, because Mercury retrograde brings anxiety anyway. Full moons can bring emotions up anyway.
Uranus stationing, that's
Uranus station, like, I'm
unpredictable.
out of here.
Yeah.
I never liked you anyway. No, just
Like, ah.
kidding.
Or something changes in your job and then all of a sudden relationships get, kind of blow up because there is, oh, what are we going to do now? Is our security at stake? So it's a very security oriented moon too. And so we're going to feel the world changing because it's a cardinal full moon and with Uranus stationing. So there can be some turning points that get underway that do trigger our sense of comfort, security. And then how do we deal with that in relationship when we might be breaking down on our own and how we're feeling so many things inside, and how do we come at others within that, and so these are choices that we get to make, right? So it's a very interesting full moon.
Venus is about at that new moon degree, right? 12, which was
That
12
is true.
degrees. And, so I would say, look back at your intentions of the new moon, look back at your values, your priorities, because we might want to be reacting to things or whatever. Are we still in alignment with our priorities? Are we still valuing who and what we've said, we've decided we valued? I still like the fact that the nodes are square to Jupiter in Pisces, Jupiter being hopefully being on its best behavior, giving us like positive things, and in Pisces, us being able to connect to either the emotional healing side or the spiritual side, things like that. Now, I had seen one of the things that I did notice. Remember during our last summit where it was like, one of the round tables we had was, are we going to have another
Roaring 20s? Yeah.
And I remember Tara All, who's so Saturnian, she always is like, no. She's like, no, I don't feel like it's going to be that. I feel like it's going to be more of an opening of spirituality. And so we were talking about mostly Jupiter into Pisces, from last summer and this year. I saw some of that, but I also saw a lot of excess. People saying, oh, well, we're back in the world now. I want to spend, spend, spend. I literally just saw yesterday, it said Sotheby's, who's the art and luxury goods auction house, had their best year in their entire 77-year history or whatever, 70-something year history. They sold over something crazy, like something billions of dollars, 70-something billion dollars. And I'm also feeling that there is this, for those of us who are attuned to spiritual healing, things like that, which is luckily seems like a lot more people. There's other people who maybe they express that through spending money or escaping, in different ways, whether it's material, whether it's unfortunately through things like drugs or alcohol, or however people escape. There may be this real emphasis of like this desire to sort of escape from some of the harsher Capricornian realities happening.
That is true. That is true. These are all potential things that can come up. But what I do want to pick your brain on before we end up going is the following day of the true node moving into Taurus and Scorpio, and the sun basically trining at the same time. But mostly just your take on the changing of the nodes, or anything that you might have there.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm so tired of I'm ready for a new story, a new nodal story.
I know, a new narrative.
Yes, a new narrative.
Irony.
Thank you very much, Gemini and Sag.
Move along.
Moving on. We're moving on. We did have that eclipse in Scorpio, which I think kind of was, handing over sort of the transition a little bit. But that's our territory. I'm a Scorpio moon, you're a Scorpio rising. And I'm also North Node in Scorpio, South Node in Taurus. And, it does feel like I remember the main phrase that I kept hearing with North Node in Gemini was pivoting. Everybody had to pivot, because we had to like learn how to how to engage in this new reality, of being online all the time and not being able to be in the world and society. So I feel like less emphasis on pivoting, maybe more of an emphasis on, how can we sustain ourselves with the North Node in Taurus. That has to do with our biological reality, our biological survival, shelter, things like that. These starting to be more and more emphasized. Even things like maybe clinging to material goods again, like finding, finding the value in that, finding the value in it, really back into the material world, just in general. And not so much about like a world of ideas and possibilities, as far as like, what are we going to do now with our resources? Now, there's definitely going to be a story around resources. Maybe there could be a lack of resources in some areas. There's already been some talk about like food shortages in some parts of the world, which I would hate to think that would be really affecting people. But the climate change stuff may become, we may actually see that the effects of it in our material earthly world. So that would be one sort of shift in emphasis.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about that too, as I was kind of like putting together the list of transits for Capricorn season, and just thinking about that change overall, is that exact thing. It's like we're going to see concentrated energy around survival needs, food, climate, etc. But some of the excitement for me personally, when I think about it, is because it's going to come into contact with Uranus there, and have eclipses. And obviously, summer of 2022 will have the North Node conjunct Uranus. As I'm wondering if this is the time where we actually do something about the things that we've been talking about for so long, like, dealing with certain aspects of climate change, realizing that how we grow our food is not as efficient, or we're not replenishing the lands the way that we could, in order to yield the best crops, and resting things, and just all this stuff. So I kind of got excited about that maybe this is actually the time, through the disruption of it, of course, or it reaching its breaking point in some way, where we actually find, to use the word that you just used, a new sense of sustainability. And that's exciting to me, because I feel like the nodes in Cancer and Capricorn, I feel like that was the pivot. Gemini and Sag was all about just dealing with the back and forth energy of it all, and how we
of our opinions about
it. Exactly.
Like...
Exactly. And so now this fixed change is actually going to be like, okay, well, how are we rooting down here? Like what real world stuff do we need to do? What deep emotional content that we have to like root up with just the changes that are happening on this planet. But it's interesting. I'm ready for it. I agree. Gemini, Sag, move along. I am done with you.
And when we look at like Taurus, being ruled by Venus, and that having a lot to do with biology, and then the South Node in Scorpio, I mean, we may, see like actual literal, and even though we probably have had evidence of like climate change and things like that, of people like literally dying from it, or like, little literal communities being affected by it, like by their livelihoods.
Yeah.
I'm sensing that this may become more part of like the immediate like conversation. That's the good thing about the nodes, is it shows you what is actually most present. And they say that there's nothing stronger than an idea whose time has come. And I feel like this is the social conversation, the national and international, even one conversation, like, Scorpio is often about death. Let's just face it. It's about death. It's about toxicity. It's about things causing decay, what's decayed. And, but that Taurus is the will to survive. It can be the determination to survive. And so, I just feel like maybe this is what it takes, right? Maybe we get to almost a brink. We feel like that there could be experiences of like, wow, this is telling us, what is it that the earth needs? And I mean, one of the things is we need to shift our, it seems like careers and jobs away from things like coal. I mean, why are there even coal mines anymore? I don't know. But like that people actually are, our own livelihoods are tied to the sustainability of the earth, so that we're all in alignment with that and how we live.
Absolutely. I was just talking to a friend the other day, who she does amazing plant art. That's what she does. But she was telling me, she's like, yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine who is in the gem world, and, mining and things like that. And they were talking about turquoise, and they're like, we can barely get turquoise anymore with the gem boom that happened and everybody wanting gems in their life and stuff like that. We are tapping the earth dry of these things that take millions and millions of years to form. And so I think that it is going to be a real wake up call to just how stressed we have made our resources, with the idea of like production and supply and demand and things like that. And getting back to basics in a sense, and not so much superfluous and the pretty, you know, the pretty things that we want or we think we need, and how that impacts the earth along the way. So I just wanted to bring that up because when you said that, I was like, oh, that reminds me of what my friend said.
You
And
know, that could be one of it, that we actually come to the end of certain resources that we thought were always replenishable.
yeah.
And maybe they won't be immediately replenishable. And that will have us to take pause and decide, like, wait, what is it that we're doing that is, you know, causing these things to end? You know, the other thing that I was thinking of all this was, you know, have you heard of that author, that Irish author, Sally Rooney, who is like huge? You know, she wrote Normal People, and
No.
she's like this like gen or millennial like superstar author, right? And so her first couple of books were crazy successful because they dealt with you know, young people in their 20s or so, like just grappling with sexuality and like relationships and things like that. And I don't know, it also had a little element of like soft porn, I think.
Who doesn't
I mean,
love a little soft porn?
that's the only thing I could think of that was like why they were so incredibly successful. But
Throw
anyway, she's a
sex
good
in
writer
it.
too.
Sex sells.
It's got sex in it. So anyway, she is actually a very talented writer. Well, her latest book, called Beautiful World, Where Are You? It just went gangbusters because everybody wants whatever she writes. But there was a lot of controversy in it because there's a little bit of a spoiler, but it's written everywhere, that it ended with you know, one of the main characters just saying she wanted just sort of simple values, a simple life, marriage, religion, like getting back to, you know, having a simple home, like with her husband, having children and things like that. And honestly, there was a huge backlash from a lot of her readers because they're like, what, like this isn't what, you know, the character sold out, and this isn't, I didn't want some morality, you know, blah 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 at the end of it. But it, you know, at some point, how much more rebellion are we going to do? You know, like you do so much rebellion, as you said earlier, to sort of break the what's stuck in the system. And then what are we left with? And I think that when you mature at a certain stage, which the millennials are now, like they're not like kids anymore, you got the Zoomers like coming up after them, you know, sometimes having, you know, like again, having a roof over your head, having someone you can trust and come home to, having like enough food to eat, just having enough is enough. You know, like we see oftentimes Scorpio being like, have, you know, the drama of life and having to experience the darkness and having to experience power and powerlessness and all this crazy stuff. Whereas like sometimes with the opposite, with Taurus, it's just needing stability, just needing peace. You know, the simple things that lead to, again, our biological survival. We realize that maybe we have devalued that, and maybe we need to get back to valuing that in new ways that we hadn't before, and that might be even a revelation to us.
Oh, I love that. Is the perfect way to end that, because amen, sister. So, all right. Well, you know, I always ask before we wrap up a season episode, if you had one word to describe Capricorn season, what would it be?
I really think that for this Capricorn season, we really want to focus on our values. And that might sound very simplistic, but a lot of times when we are really like searching for something in life, or feel out of alignment, it's because we aren't living what our true values are. There's something about how we're living our life and then the values that we hold. And so this is a time to bring those in alignment. And the first step is to get clear on what do we value the most. And there's some, you know, they say that if you have more than 3 priorities, you don't have any priorities, right? So, you know, it's like valuing what we prioritize with our, where do you spend your time, your money, and your focus? And, if you even just looking at your bank account and looking at your calendar, that's showing you what your values are. And if they're not aligned with what you know to be true for you at this stage in your life as valuable, then something needs to change with that. And, the good news is you have the power to change that. So I would say let's focus on our values for this Capricorn season, because that can really change our entire world once we start living them.
Sage wisdom from the Capricorn. That is
What
I
about
totally
you?
agree. I totally agree. I am right there with you with that world. Maybe I'll back it up with integrity, because I think what you're saying leads us to a point of integrity. And so get in touch with what those values are, so that we are back in integrity with ourselves and what we're building here in the world, because there's a lot of energy to change your physical reality, to change your relationships, to purge things that have been burdened, purge power dynamics and old control structures that just don't suit you. And so what is still clinging around that either distracts you or keeps you in some way from being in integrity? And that always changes with, like what you were just saying, with values,
I
because
think
values
this
change.
retrograde will bring it up. We might find a whole new level of what integrity means to us.
Exactly. And whole new values along with that. And so I think those two words really go hand in hand, because they're dependent upon one another. I just got chills. All right. Well, what a fabulous season recap. I love it, Christina. So before we go, where can people find you? Remind people what you got going on.
Of course, you can find me, well, first of all, on Instagram. That is my social media of choice. And you can find me at Radiant Astrology on Instagram. Now, I have a lot of, fake profiles that try to be me, but there's only one.
There's only one, Christina.
So don't fall for any of the other one. And I will never DM you and ask you and say, oh, lovely, I have a reading message for you. Send me $50. I don't do that. Okay. So if you get one of those, that's not coming from me. But I'm on Instagram at Radiant Astrology, and you can find me online at radiantastrology.com. And I have, like I said, my new moon, new year workshop on January 3rd on that first Sunday. So join me there. You can find all the details on radiantastrology.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, where can you find me? You can find me over at energeticprinciples.com. And of course, I'll share Christina's details there in her upcoming workshop. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Energetic Principles. And maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's not. No one has tried to imitate me. I'm glad. I see it coming up all the time for astrologers. There are people trying to
count your blessings.
People. I know.
It usually
I am.
happens during a Mercury retrograde, though. So maybe
just wait. I don't speak too soon. I'm like, why doesn't anyone want to impersonate me? No, I just thought it's such a weird thing that's been happening on the social media. But just FYI, yeah, good public service message for anybody that follows astrologers, because it's happening to so many people, and it is very strange. And it's always strange to me when people fall for it too, because it's like, but hey, no judgment. Anyways, I'm diverting. But so another thing I can say here is that if you haven't heard the Astrology of 2022 forecast that I did with Gray, that's up for you to either watch on YouTube or listen to the audio. We only made it halfway through the detail because there was so much to say with 2022, but check that out. And there's also a Venus retrograde episode with Shu Yap and Spencer Michaud that is up. If you want to get more in touch with the Venus story and some myths behind that. And we really unpacked that there too. And of course, if you think people need to hear this broadcast and what's coming up for Capricorn season, and really how we can take advantage of this new year, spread the word, share this broadcast with a friend, send it over. You can also sign up for my monthly newsletter, The Heavenly Wind, that will come out at the beginning of the year too. That will have all the details for January. So that being said, you can find that all in the details of wherever you listen to this podcast. Leave a review where you listen to it. That helps us be seen further too. And I love how I'm ending this broadcast and my neighbor's outside with a leaf blower, which is literally my nemesis in life. Ban all leaf blowers. I'm just going to public service message. All right. Well, Christina, thank you again for joining me. I always love when you come and chat it up.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And I can't wait to have you back on my channel because I know we like to mix it up and visit each other's spaces. So thank you so much for this. And I will see you next year. Happy holidays and Happy New Year.
Yes. Happy holidays, everyone. We hope you are enjoying the end of the year and get the most you can out of it. So thank you so much for joining us here today. And as always, may the stars be with you.